Hi Chefeteers, I'm Chef Nakia and I'm about to do something that I'm getting a lot of heat for. A lot of, yeah, you really should rethink that and maybe don't do it. And I'm gonna bring you all along on my journey and you guys can judge for yourself if you think it was a good decision or if I should not do what I'm planning to do. As I'm sure you've seen from the title, it's really not that dramatic, but weddings sometimes make people weird. So some of the responses are, you know, a little maybe more dramatic than they should be. So I figured I'd start off the video a little bit dramatic. But really all I want to do is make the cocktail hour food and dessert for my upcoming wedding. I'm getting married in September and we have a caterer to make the main meal. However, weddings are very expensive, y'all. Like, it's gonna be a very expensive day. And even though I have never been married or never had a wedding, I have made food for groups of people, so I feel very confident in my skills of doing that. So we'll see if I end up regretting putting in the extra work, or if I really enjoy it and I have a lot of fun doing it, and my guests love that they're getting to eat some of the food that I made in hosting this event. So today's video, I'm gonna talk you through how I am planning to do this cocktail hour food and these desserts. And then next month I'll have a video about kind of like more of the execution, like the preparation, and then into the execution. And then lastly, probably in October, I'll share with you my thoughts about how it went. I guess my reaction, my if I regret it or not. So be sure to stay tuned during this journey. If you will just sometimes love to see people potentially fail, or maybe succeed, most likely succeed. See. Or if maybe you've thought, ooh, maybe I would want to do cocktail hour food or dessert or an element of the food for my wedding or for a large event. You can see how I'm planning it and the prep work I'm doing, and maybe you can gauge, okay, that's something that I'm willing to commit to and I want to do, or that seems like too much work, I don't want to do it. Or, you know, just really get a feel for, oh, is this something that I would want to do too? So I have been a chef for over a decade, and this is how I am approaching doing my own cocktail hour food and dessert for my wedding. Maybe you can learn some tips from me, and maybe you will learn what not to do for yourself if you choose to go down this path. So a little bit of context about our wedding, just so you can kind of compare it to, you know, whatever situation you might be in. We are getting married at a venue that is about 4.5, 5 hours away from where we live. So I think some people might consider that like destination wedding or maybe semi-destination. The point is, we'll be driving out there a few days before, and we will be staying in like a VRBO. So we'll have like refrigerated and freezer space, but it's not like coming from our own house. It's a beautiful venue in a valley in the mountains, and it's at a public park, which is really awesome. The venue is great, except that the venue doesn't have a kitchen on site at all. So the caterer that we hired is going to come and set up an outdoor kitchen the day of our event. And he has his process. He and his team, they have their process for how they make all of that work, because they do events at this venue often. But that means that for us, we don't have any of like our own refrigerated space on site or any real prep area on site. So the desserts and the cocktail hour food must be ready to go, everything ready except just being like set out onto a table before we get to the venue. So that's that context. And then just kind of in general for our wedding, we really want it to be as close as you can get to an elopement with like 60, 70 people joining us. We would go hike to the middle of nowhere and just get married there, but we want to share, the special day with our closest friends and family. And so we want our event to feel just very casual and comfortable and, in tune with the natural beauty that's around us. So we are DIYing a lot of stuff. We're going really simple on a lot of things and very untraditional on things. So it's not like this is like a black tie affair. And by the way, I'm doing our own cocktail food. It is the vibe, I think, very much lends itself for me bringing our own cocktail hour food and dessert to really make sense. Also, we are having the wedding itself is just like the one day, but people are going to arrive a couple days before, and we're going to have all kinds of fun events and time together. So I kind of see it as I'd be preparing food or figuring out food for those anyway. So now I can just make extra, have food for those pre-events, and then also have food at the wedding. So really it doesn't feel like that much extra work to me. It's really just making a larger amount of some of these things, especially the desserts. I think that's probably all the important context, but if I need to add more later, so be it. All right, so why are we so adamant, okay, especially me, but we so adamant about doing our own cocktail hour food and dessert food? And what are the benefits of this? Well, number one, and probably the biggest place we'll see a difference is in the budget. Weddings are expensive, wedding food is expensive, it is all very expensive, and I have the skills to prepare food for large groups, so I would be paying for somebody else's expertise whenever I also hold that expertise. And so that just felt kind of wrong to me. I'm not allowed to do the entire meal. Like I said, we hired a catering team, so our chef caterer is going to take care of the main meal, but this allows him and his team to focus on the main meal, the entrees and the side dishes, and not even have to worry about the dessert and the cocktail hour food. Their timeline can be much more succinct because it is first plate out, and we're doing family style dinner, but first plate out, last entree out, done. They don't have to then also do the dessert, and they didn't have to get there an extra hour and a half early to ensure that cocktail hour food would be ready, right? So I'm hoping that their timeline can be more streamlined. And then of course the lower cost of the food itself will be helpful. So we're very excited for that aspect of it, but that's not the only benefit. We also get to, be a little bit more creative, show a little bit more of us as people in the cocktail hour food and the desserts that we choose. I show my love for my friends and family through food, and so being able to actually serve people my food at our wedding just feels very appropriate to me. Also, for the dessert, I'm not making a 4-tier wedding cake or anything like that and delivering it. I have made one wedding cake. It is the one and only Chef Nakia wedding cake because I was a nervous wreck. It's just not my favorite thing to do. By not having a big cake, we also aren't going to have to pay any sort of cake cutting fee, and we don't need to rent additional plates for said cake. So the desserts that I make are going to be in either little recycled glass jars or paper cups that people can just grab and eat, or cookies, so they don't even need a serving dish. So we're gonna save a little bit of money on rentals there also. And for cocktail hour food, most of the stuff, it'll be skewers, and then we may just need a few paper plates. I'll find compostable paper. Actually, no, I definitely have compostable paper plates that we can just use. So we can see another benefit, especially in cost, for the rental items. I've also heard from other people who have gotten married that nobody ate our cocktail hour food. I think that this can definitely depend on the event and everything else that's going on, but I have a little bit of this fear of, well, what if we spend the money and our caterer spends all this time putting together cocktail hour food and like 10% of it gets touched. What are we gonna do with the rest of it? Like, I don't wanna waste it. That would just be heartbreaking to me. So if nobody eats cocktail hour food, if that's actually true, then I would so much rather prepare, some food to have out, and if nobody touches it, we can just pack it up and take it with us and then put it out at the next event that we do the following day. And then maybe it'll get eaten there. And if it is eaten, then that's awesome. But I would so much rather the food that isn't eaten to be the food that I've prepared and not our caterer's food. This idea of missing out on cocktail hour food, I see it as a benefit that they're just missing out on my food and they'll have other opportunities to eat it. And lastly, we're not gonna do any favors, but in a way, the desserts can kind of double as a wedding favor. So if you're somebody who's like very stuck on, I really wanna have wedding favors at my wedding for guests to take with them, maybe you can use the dessert as a way of doing a wedding favor. So like I said, we'll have cookies so people can take cookies with them if they want to. And then we'll also have cake in a jar. So it'll be like layers of cake and mousse. And because they're in jars like that, people, if there's more at the end of the night, people can take a couple home with them. That's great. It's kind of like a wedding favor and a dessert in one. So those are the benefits that I see. Now the potential complications and probably the reasons why a lot of people are telling me, hey, don't do this, is what I'm going to list next. And I say potential complications because I believe with a great plan, we can avoid these. And so they will never actually be complications, but they're just things that I'm keeping in mind as I create this plan. So potential complications are food safety, so ensuring that every potentially hazardous food stays out of the temperature danger zone, less than 2 hours, spends less than 2 hours in the temperature danger zone. Potentially hazardous foods are foods that have like cream in them, so like mousse, foods like cooked vegetables, steamed rice, although those probably won't really be much of concern. Meats like proteins, eggs, those are potentially hazardous foods. So just ensuring that everything is maintained at a safe temperature and not, sitting in direct sunlight for an hour. That will definitely reduce the quality. Those kinds of things are important to keep in mind. Also, the proximity of the work to the event, meaning like for cocktail hour food, the day before the wedding, we'll need to spend time putting that together and ensuring that it's ready to go for the following day. That isn't something that I can do like 3 weeks ahead of time. The good thing is the desserts will be done by like August. Most of my desserts are going to be done and in the freezer, just waiting to be carried to the wedding. So it's very helpful to be able to get ahead of it as much as possible, but there is still that concern with anything food or flowers or anything like perishable. You only have a certain amount of time from when you make it to when people need to eat it. Transportation, and so having enough space to properly transport the food without it getting too warm is very important. So we have a bunch of coolers. I think we'll be okay. And then the day of the wedding is going to be a very busy day. So ensuring that there's a well thought out and well communicated timeline, of course, for everything that's happening in the day, but specifically for this, a very well executed timeline for the food, for when the food should leave the VRBO, and be packed in what, and arrive at the venue and be placed where, and who's doing each of these pieces of it. Having a timeline put together ahead of time and very well communicated is going to be extremely important. Okay, so those are the benefits, those are the possible complications. And now I'm going to go over with you the steps that I am taking to plan out exactly what desserts and what cocktail hour food we are doing for our wedding. And I'm, for the most part, grouping these two together. However, I will go through some nuances between each because, like I said, for the most part, the dessert will be something that I can have ready to go like next week. But the cocktail hour food, it's not going to be the type of food that I'm going to want to freeze and then thaw. Also, as far as the day of the event, the cocktail hour food is going to be out much sooner than the dessert food. So those nuances are going to change some of these things for each category. For the most part, I will talk about them all together. Okay, so step one in my plan is to think about the journey of the food from preparing it to eating it to cleaning up after it. You can't forget the cleanup part. So for cocktail hour food, I'm thinking, all right, I need to figure out how many hours it's going to take to, once I have purchased the ingredients, put that together. How many people will be helping to put that together, so the people and the time that it will take to execute that. And then how do we store that from the moment it's prepared to the moment that it needs to be transported to the venue. Once it's at the venue, how long before it can go up on the serving tables? And then do we need ice trays and plastic wrap? Or some sort of barrier on top so that bugs can't just, land on the food, and then some type of ice tray underneath to ensure that the food stays cold. And that for each platter of cocktail hour food. And then, okay, how are people going to eat it? Do we need to rent any extra plates, which I don't think we are going to do, but we'll have more cocktail napkins available. Do we need any extra silverware or anything like that? Because of the foods we've chosen, probably not going to need that. But thinking through that whole thing. And then once a platter is empty, who is responsible for taking that out of the way or replenishing more onto it? So thinking through all of those elements definitely starts kind of the bones of the plan. And then for dessert, for example, that is going from, okay, baking the cake and baking the pie bars and baking the cookies, taking the cake for the cake jars and then making the mousse and making them into jars and freezing those and cutting the pie bars and freezing those, freezing the cookies after they're baked, and then packing that up to get it from our home up to the VRBO for the wedding, and then from the VRBO to the wedding venue, and then where is it going to sit during dinner when, nobody's ready for dessert yet, and at what point and who is going to put those desserts from whatever their transportation cooler was onto the table in the dessert display. The nice thing about the desserts too is that none of them are super fragile. So I'm not as worried about those kinds of things, but once it's all set up and available for people to grab, then do we need extra forks and spoons for the cakes in a jar? And will we need even more napkins available? Things like that. And then at the end of the night, who's going to be in charge of taking those platters and packing them away so that we can take them home with us? So now, what is the best food to use within this workflow? For example, for dessert, we're not going to do cannolis because they're not great for freezing and then thawing, and the shell is going to absorb the moisture from the filling, not be so great. Donuts. I love fresh donuts, but in my opinion, donuts that have been sitting out a while, just not the same. So, no donuts, no cannolis, no eclairs, no ice cream. I don't want to be scooping ice cream. I don't want to have to think about keeping ice cream frozen. And then from the cocktail hour side food to no guacamole, because that would oxidize and might not look great. Again, thinking about the crispy things with very, very moist items. The crispy, if they are on top of each other, the crispy is going to absorb that moisture and become soggy, staying away from those items. And then consider using crock pots to keep hot food hot if it's if you're doing meatballs or something like that. Also, the ice tray idea for keeping cold foods cold. And I recommend making food that's very easy to recognize, that you feel like a lot of your guests are going to be able to glance at and know exactly what it is. If you have something, or you can of course put out signs and labels for other foods that maybe aren't as apparent, but you're probably gonna get a lot of questions oh, what's that? What's that? What's in that? If you don't have everything listed out. So, you know, if you can have like a skewer with mozzarella and an olive and a cucumber and a tomato, people will look at that and it'll be pretty easy to see what that is. And so if somebody has lactose, you know, is lactose intolerant, then they might say like, okay, I'm not gonna eat that. Whereas if it's hard to tell what a food is, then people might not eat it just in case it has something that they're allergic to. So consider keeping hot foods hot, cold foods cold, the texture, maintaining an ideal texture, and then having foods that guests will easily be able to recognize. And as I mentioned with the desserts, like the pie bars, I'm going to have in little paper cups, so those are really easy for guests to grab. You may want to avoid making guests like scoop, or especially like picture like a pie knife and then trying to scoop a bite-sized thing off of a platter onto their plate. They may end up dropping it or chasing it around the platter and chasing it off. So try to make it as easy as possible for your guests in that sense too. Now that we know what types of food we want to include, now we can get down to the specifics of what flavor combinations and like specific items within that we want to do. For example, for like the pie bites, right? Pie bites is great, but now, okay, specifically which ones? Pumpkin pie and cherry pie. Do I want to do an apple pie also? That might get overwhelming. So try to limit yourself to 2, maybe 3 variations of the group of food that you want to do, right? So like, I'll do 2 flavors of pie bars, 3 flavors of cookies, and then probably 3 cake cups. Depending on people's allergies, I might throw an extra gluten-free one in there, but we'll see. You probably don't want to do like 8 different variations because it gets overwhelming for your guests, and it will also be more overwhelming for you to produce all of those different kinds. So keep it simple. Keep it scaled back as much as you can. Your guests will appreciate it, and that they don't have to choose between so many different things also. And then whenever you're planning, okay, well, that's fine that it's like 2 or 3 variations of it, but then how many of each one do I make? So for dessert, plan on about 5 to 6 bites per person. Now, this does not necessarily mean 5 to 6 desserts per person, but bites. So if my pie bar is a 3-bite dessert, then I would want to plan 2 of those for each person. But if my cake jar itself is 5 bites, and only 1 of those per person. Also, like, you might be talking to people ahead of time and they might get super excited about one thing that you mentioned. So maybe make extra of that. But for the most part, you can plan 5 to 6 bites worth of a dessert per person. So whatever that means for the size of dessert that you're doing. Now, cocktail hour food can be a little bit more complicated, only because it's so dependent on like when, like the time of day that your cocktail hour is being held, and like the weather where you are, because when it's really hot, people don't want to eat as much. And then how clearly you have communicated to your guests how long it's going to be until dinner starts. So if you are getting married earlier in the day and dinner isn't until 7 o'clock, and maybe you have like a 2-hour long cocktail hour, you're definitely going to want to have more food available for your people. But if your cocktail hour is only like 45 minutes long and you've already told everybody like, hey, cocktail hour is gonna end at 6 o'clock and dinner is gonna be served at 6:30, then they know, okay, there's not very much time between now and dinner. I don't want to fill up on cocktail hour food. I don't want to eat too much. So I'm just going to hold off and wait until dinner. Every situation is going to be different. Also, you know your guests, so you know how much of a snackers they are and whatnot. So it will be different for cocktail hour food, but I would say on the lower end of things, plan like, 1 of each item per person. And then on the higher end of things, don't go more, I mean, really, I would say 2.5 per person, which I know sounds weird in theory, but for the math, it'll end up making sense. The only time you would go over like 2.5 per person for a cocktail hour style food is if that is the only food of the night. And if you are planning to do most of your cocktail hour food as like charcuterie boards, head to the link in the description box for a charcuterie board planner so you can type in the amount of people you have, and I will spit out to you, how many meats to have and cheeses and carrying vessels and all that good stuff. And something else to keep in mind is remember that you can always mix and match a combination of stuff made from scratch and store-bought stuff. Especially for like dessert. You could have like little candies or little cookies that you buy along with, 1 or 2 items that you make from scratch. It's not like every single thing that you have for your guests you have to have personally made. Take a shortcut if you want. If this is starting to feel like a lot of work. For me, it's fun and I love it. And I'm very excited to do it. But yeah, I totally understand it's not for everybody. And the last step that I am going to take in the planning phase is to gather my recipes, but also like write recipes, but for like you may just be gathering what you would like to make, and creating like maps and guides, which that might sound a little extreme, but I promise you, it's gonna help you out so much if you do it. Okay, so with the recipe part, look for the recipe that works well for you. If you need to test it out, do that. And test it through like a freeze-thaw process if that's how you are going to be creating the food for your wedding. So you can see like, oh wow, the texture's changed a lot after it was thawed and I now maybe want to change it or look for a different recipe. And then go ahead and do the math now to figure out, okay, if I'm making 40 servings of this, then I'm going to need to buy, 18 apples or whatever it is. So you can do the math now, that way you're prepared, and you can even, put that into a grocery shopping list. So from like the food aspect, cool, like we've got our plan in place, our recipes, what we're gonna do. But now there's a whole second part of it that is non-food related, but like in support. So whether that's people or items of support. So you're gonna wanna be thinking about, okay, what serving platters am I going to use? What kind of serving utensils might we need? Are there any additional skewers or napkins or silverware or tongs or chafing dishes or ice tray solutions that if I was hiring someone to do this, they would bring it and I probably would kind of ignore like that it was even there. It wouldn't have to be a top of mind item. But what do I need to include? Because it's like if you're doing the cocktail hour food, your caterer isn't going to say like, oh, by the way, here's 18 platters for you. So you'll want to either rent those from the rentals place and coordinate that or bring your own. So don't forget the equipment part. And then as you want to execute this, it's going to be very important that you communicate really well with the people who are going to help you. So whether that's a wedding coordinator or friends or family members or any other like service staff that you've hired, make sure that you have a well-written plan that you can communicate to them, especially if it's friends or family. Have the conversation as early as you can to get their buy-in and get their commitment to help. And then create guides and maps as reminders for the day. So like if you have a certain way that you want something displayed, have, taped onto the cooler. Number 1, remove food from cooler. Number 2, place in this platter. Number 3, have it shaped like a star, whatever crazy thing you want to do. I would also recommend like go as simple as possible with that kind of stuff, but whatever you want to do, just have like maps and guides that explain it without you having to be there to explain it. And if all of this makes you anxious, you're like, well, this kind of sounds like I want to save money and it kind of sounds like something I could do, but I don't know for sure. Test it out. Have like a dinner party over, and you can start with a smaller group of people and go up and up, or volunteer, to take dessert somewhere, or have cocktail hour style food for a banquet or something. Like maybe you can volunteer to take stuff somewhere, or you can host people at your house, but you could do a couple practice runs and see, okay, how do I feel? Do I feel like I'm on top of this? Is this causing me a lot more stress than I feel like it's worth? Am I, instead of looking forward to working with the food and getting it ready, am I kind of dreading it? Because I think having those experiences and understanding, you know, how much you do or do not like this process can help you figure out, okay, maybe I'm gonna, you know, delegate it to somebody else from the beginning. If you're a crazy person like me, you're gonna say, oh my God, I love this, and I definitely want it as part of my wedding. So join me next month. I'll put out a video talking you through the preparation and some of the execution of this stuff. So, you know, we've planned what food we're gonna have and how we're gonna do it. So now, next I'll show you how I'm starting to execute that plan. And then, as I said, later on, I'll have a video talking about if I regret it or not. What I could do differently if I could do it again, what went well and what did not go well. So stay tuned for this journey. It'll be fun, right guys? It'll be super fun, and I think that it will come together really well, but if it doesn't, you'll see. So thank you so much, Chefeteers. In 2 weeks, I'll put up another video, and that will be much more in normal vein of, you know, your normal cooking at home, joyful meals, not necessarily wedding related, but thank you for your patience and your interest in joining me along this wedding journey. Thank you so much for watching. If there's anything you did for your wedding that you're like, oh my God, I wish I could share this with the world, please put it in the comments. I could use all the help, like wedding planning ideas and help I could get, because I'm really looking forward to being married, yes, but like looking forward to the food, and then the rest of it, help. Okay, thank you so much, Chefeteers. We'll talk again soon.